Hello, everybody. It's Tracy at the Transform Your Birth Catch-Ups. And today I'm going to talk about induction. Very hot topic, induction, unfortunately. Our induction rates of first-time mothers are up around 50%, which is not leading to better outcomes. It's actually leading to more and more babies needing a stint in neonatal intensive care, or what we call NICU. So making that decision to induce is a very important decision to make, and it gets tricky, and I really get it, because when you get told that actually this was told to a woman I was debriefing a birth with this morning. She was told that at 42 weeks there's double the rate of stillborn, but she didn't like the comment, because when she looked at the figures, it's still really low. So there's sometimes a misrepresentation of risk analysis around things like that, which can make decision-making really tricky, because your carers sometimes get a bit flippant with the evidence. And to induce for dates, to induce for big baby, to induce for IVF conception, high BMI, advanced maternal age, gestational diabetes, even when it's managed well. All of these things often come your way when it comes to induction. Now, the biggest issue with this is the very pressure to induce, or the very pressure to go into labour, is the antithesis of what that mother should be experiencing, which is just kicking around, doing her own thing, just pottering around at home, building up her energy levels, feeling relaxed and feeling completely surrendered to the process. But when you've got pressure on you to make labour happen, that can be the very thing that stops labour from happening. The other thing to know too when it comes to making decisions is checking that your baby's in a good position, because if the baby's in like a posterior position where its spine is on your spine, it's spending a lot of time there, it means that the head isn't as favourable on the cervix. In other words, it's not necessarily putting enough pressure on the cervix for you to go into labour. So doing a lot of things to lean forward, going for walks, all of those things can encourage it, but try to do it with the mindset of being chilled and open and accepting, okay? The other thing you can do, if you choose to push back against having a induction at this particular point, you always continue to reassess it. But if you choose to push back, then you can ask to go in for some extra monitoring. So as a way of mitigating that risk, then going in for extra monitoring can be really important. And of course, always, whether you're dealing with induction or not, keep an eye on baby's movements. These are very, very important things. Now, a couple of the things that I tell women to do prior to having an induction, if you can, get some acupuncture. What's good about acupuncture is it can promote ripeness. So whatever form of induction you end up going down, acupuncture can be very supportive by creating the right conditions for the induction to work. So on the resources page of the website, you'll see the names of some really good acupuncturists. Have a chat to them about, a schedule they might recommend and what their availability is. Or if you've got your own acupuncturist and they can do induction sessions, then by all means go to somebody who you're confident and familiar with. But that can be actually really helpful. The other thing acupuncture can be good at too is to help reposition babies, okay, because it has an influence on the uterus and how it's sitting there. Another couple of ideas too can be around osteo or chiro, getting some adjustments just to make sure your uterus is aligned, the hips are aligned, which means that the uterus can be more relaxed and hopefully promoting good positioning for baby to come down. So there's just a few little hints to optimize the conditions in your body to go into labour. Now, prior to an induction, this is some little exercise that I get my families to do, which is to write a letter to your baby, expressing your greatest hopes and greatest fears. Now, I know that seems a bit random, but the reason I do that is it can help women to have a bit of an emotional release. So, you might get on the computer, or if you're a handwriter, you get on and you say, oh, dear darling, I'm facing induction. I'm really scared that da-da-da-da is going to happen, and I really want for this to happen. And and you write this letter and just let yourself unlock some of the emotional tension that can happen when, particularly if there's pressure on you to induce. Writing a letter to your baby can often cause you to have a big cry. And I've got a lot of anecdotal evidence that women sometimes even go into labour, because in my experience, sometimes it can be that emotional tension that actually prevents women to go into labour. So it's a great way of releasing it, or any other form of emotional release that you that speaks to you and how you're wired. Okay, so writing a letter to your baby is just one example of an emotional release. These are all things that can help. Okay, so putting that to the side. Oh, and sorry, just when it comes to decision making, always ask the question, what are the risks of induction? Particularly if you're weighing up other risks, because you want to make sure you've got the flip side of the coin. So, assuming now that the decision's been made, we'll park that. Now, what's really interesting, I know this happens at Canberra Hospital. I suspect it might even happen at Calvary as well. I'm not sure, but North Canberra. But what they'll do is say, okay, we've got an induction window of, I don't know, Wednesday to Friday or Wednesday to Saturday. And so just be near your phone every morning and we'll ring you up to see if we can fit you in to induce you on that particular day, which in itself highlights that perhaps the induction isn't actually that important, but they'll often give you a window, okay? Now, you've decided to induce. You've got yourself in the best possible space, mindset that you can. When it comes to the induction, there's 3 phases. The first is some type of cervical support to soften and open. It could be the tape or the gel, or it could be what's called the balloon, where they put in a little balloon to try to help open up your cervix. The other thing too, they might offer prior to the induction is what's called a stretch and sweep, which is where they get in there and start to separate the cervix and pull at your waters. And it's another little way that we can trigger labour. Pardon me, sorry. For some women, they don't like it. Other women, doesn't bother them. That's a choice. Sometimes it can be successful. Anyway, back to the actual induction. So step 1 is some type of cervical support to help ripen the cervix. Step 2 is breaking of the waters. And so that involves a vaginal examination where they use a little hook and they pull at the waters to try and release them and get the amniotic fluid released, bringing the baby down more heavily on the cervix. And then the third is a cannula with syntocinon, okay, which is artificial oxytocin. We use it to sometimes induce labour, and if labour's stalled, to push it on a little bit, okay. We also use it to help retract the placenta after the birth a little bit quicker. So it's a synthetic form of oxytocin. It doesn't cross the blood-brain barrier, but it does work on the uterus quite strongly. Now, you can have the cervical ripening of some sort, and that work alone, step 1 might be enough to get you going, or step 1 and 2 might be enough to get you going. If you're getting good, strong, solid contractions as a result of those 2 processes, you can ask for the 3rd stage to be delayed, and we'll see if we need it. That's always an important thing to realise that you have choice over. It's often not presented that way. They'll often say we need to do this, and then we do this, and then we do that, and they just expect to go through those phases. But I've had women who have pushed back on the 3rd stage. The 3rd stage with the synthetic oxytocin is often the one that can be very strong on the mother's body. It's the one people worry about the most. However, if it's managed well, it can be fine. So that's good for you to know. Now, whatever stage of that process you're on, now, partners, this is something I want you to remember. Remind her to mentally welcome everything into your body. You do not want to be having an induction with a mindset of, oh, I really didn't want this. Oh, God, it's so painful. And you're focusing on all the hard stuff. You do the opposite. You say, okay, you calm, breathe, you relax. And as they perhaps put in the balloon or whatever it is that they're doing, you mentally affirm, welcome into my body. Thank you for getting my baby here safely. Okay? So you don't want to have resistance around this. Once you've made the decision, step into the decision and welcome whatever it is that comes into your body. The other thing you want to also know is that you want to negotiate the ability to move during your labour. Now, with inductions come continuous monitoring because they've got to make sure that baby's responding okay and not getting distressed. Now, if you're not careful, if you don't ask for this, you might find yourself on the bed not able to move. You don't want to do that. So you ask for the Bluetooth monitor, or if the waters have broken and the baby's down low enough, the scalp monitor. The scalp monitor is preferred because it tends to give a better trace on the baby's heart rate, whereas the Bluetooth monitor, because the baby moves, it's on the outside of your belly, they can lose the trace, and particularly if you've got a wriggly little baby, they can lose it often, which then means you've got people, midwives, messing around on your belly. So I think it's important that you understand those two differences, and the scalp monitor might be preferred for that reason because it tends to be more accurate and it also tends to give you more freedom to move. So that's really important. Now, in the early stages, what will often happen, it does vary, but typically they might say, okay, we'll get you to come in at, 5 or 6 o'clock in the afternoon, and they'll do all their paperwork and stuff, and then they'll pop you in a room and they'll do the first stage of the induction, which is the cervical ripening. Now, in those early stages, what they typically expect is that it's not going to kick off straight away, and you're likely to, on some level, it'll work overnight, and then probably in the morning they'll break your waters, and then later that morning they might offer you the Synto. One of the things that can be very, very tricky in that space is sleeping, because you're kind of overstimulated. And you could set yourself up, if you're not careful, to be awake all night. You don't want to do that. You want to make sure that you sleep as much as possible. So try to create the conditions for that to happen. Okay. I know that can be tricky, but it could be helpful to bring an eye mask, noise cancelling earphones, and just do your best to sleep, because you need to pace yourself with labour, and that's really important. The other thing too that people need to realise is that the hormonal cocktail that you have, because sometimes I get people saying, will it still work if I'm being induced? Synthetic oxytocin takes over your oxytocin, so you don't get the benefit of your oxytocin, but you can still activate endorphins, relaxin, prolactin, all of those other feel-good hormones as well. Okay, and you want to keep adrenaline at bay. So yes, those hormones will still support you, but you have to appreciate that the synthetic oxytocin will take over your own oxytocin levels. So that's important to know. Now, I'm going to tell you a little story. This is a story that came to me recently from a couple who were debriefing their birth story with me. And they came in for an induction, I think about 5 o'clock in the afternoon. And they were still there at about 9 o'clock, and nobody had seen them, and they were really, really busy, and they sent them home. Now, fortunately for them, they made the decision to go home because she was tired, she was knackered, she really didn't want to keep going. But there was another couple beside them who were very a bit upset about it and insisted that they stay. And so they had, after being, waiting for as long as the other couple, pushed through with the induction, which is understandable because you get yourself all really revved up. Okay, we're going to do it today, and then they're too busy. Okay, and it's certainly understandable that people would want to push back and say, no, I'm not going home, you'll do it now. Whereas when I was talking to this couple that I was working with, I said, that was a really good call, because you need to pace yourself. Now, interestingly enough, they came back day number 2 and the same thing happened. They got sent home. So I just want to raise this story because these sort of things can happen. Now, third time lucky, they got the induction. People were very respectful of them because they'd been, had 2 false starts, and everything went really, really well. But it was that disappointment of going home that can sort of rattle people a little bit. And we want to push through because we've got ourselves all geared up. But actually, technically, it's probably better to go home, have a sleep at home, because you're going to sleep much better at home than what you will in the hospital. And I think that was a good story that I'm now going to start to share with more and more people. The other thing I think is an important thing to realize also is that you can at any time get off the bus. In other words, if you've been in there and you've tried the tape, or it's been a while since they've put it in and not much is happening, and you're feeling tired and you're feeling done in, and then they're starting to talk about breaking your waters, or they've broken your waters and nothing's happened, then you can say, look, you know what, I'm just really tired. I'd like to go home, have a good night's sleep. Can we try again tomorrow or the day after? So don't be afraid to get off the bus at any time if it's not feeling right. This is an important thing to tune into, okay? Just because we've started to go down the process doesn't mean we have to continue it. I was talking to a woman today, and she was debriefing her birth story with me, and she was saying that she was really resisting the induction, and the doctor said to her, if it doesn't work, if we're not getting signs that you're going into labour, you can go home and have a rest. And that was the decider for her to agree to have the induction, because the doctor had reminded her that she could get off the bus if she wanted to. So she was happy to give it a go after that. And it made me realise I should also make sure my families know that at any time, if it doesn't feel right or it's just not sort of happening, go home, recalibrate, have a nice meal, get a good night's sleep, have a bath, do things that really nurture you and support you, and then come back when you feel it's right. Or who knows, you might even go into labour in the meantime. So there are some really, really good hints around induction. I hope that's been really helpful. The decision making is important. Once you've navigated that and you feel comfortable, then step into the decision, own the decision, welcome everything in your body, and enjoy the process. Okay, thanks for tuning in. See ya.